Well, Joel, we've got another cinematic compost pile for you called the Slime People.
Oh, it's scabby and bumpy and absolutely hideous.
But first, another space frolic with our bullet-headed friend, Commando Cody.
Enjoy.
This time, we watch Season 1, Episode 8, The Slime People.
With the driest looking slime people you ever did see.
But there's also a short, Radar Men from the Moon, Chapter 6, Hills of Death.
With the deadest looking hills you ever did see. But first, there's some follow-up. Oh, boy. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Last episode, in our Shallow 13, we ruthlessly examined a joke. And that joke was about Cindy Williams is Twyla Tharp as Isadora Duncan in the Meredith Monk story, a one-woman show co-starring Tom Bosley as Bosley.
It's true. And the more we went into it, the funnier it got.
It was pretty good. It's a pretty good joke. And
It really is,
the
actually.
thing is, there was one further step that we could have gone. I was pretty sure when I was doing the research and writing all that up that Bosley at the end was talking about something other than Tom Bosley, but I couldn't remember what it was, and I couldn't Google it very effectively because it's just a name, and I couldn't remember even vaguely why it was ringing a bell.
But then somebody helped you ring the bell, right?
Not just somebody.
Everybody!
Every single human being who's listening to this podcast wrote in, as far as I can tell, to tell me that what a fool I was, which is true. Bosley, of course, was the go-between for Charlie and Charlie's Angels.
I totally pulled it out, but I would not have expected you to have not remembered Bosley.
Well, I didn't, and you didn't either, so...
Well, I didn't say anything, but let's all assume that there's many, many things that we all know that we never say out loud, and that's why we have listeners to help remind us of the things that we forget to say.
Yeah, anyway, most of the people who wrote in also said very nice things about the show in general, so that was also very nice. But it's true, sometimes I forget a thing, even a thing which... You know what? Here's the thing. I'll give you a little secret. Charlie's Angels was designed specifically to appeal to a certain kind of person who takes a certain kind of interest in certain kinds of people. And I'm just not that demo they were going for.
I'm mostly demo adjacent for that, you know? But I have to admit, the reboot of Charlie's Angels that came out, in the early 2000s with Drew Barrymore and Cameron Diaz and Lucy Liu, totally on board for it. Really, what a romp of a couple of movies those were.
Right, with Bill Murray as Bosley.
Oh, yeah. Well, Bill Murray was the Bosley for the first Charlie's Angels movie, which also had Sam Rockwell. I love Sam Rockwell. He's one of my favorites. And then the second movie had Bernie Mac, who stepped in to be their Bosley.
Right.
And there's a whole thing where Bosley's family had adopted Bill Murray early in his life in this Charlie's Angels reboot.
Yeah, something like that. But whatever, there's been a whole new reboot, and now it's Patrick Stewart as Bosley, so what are you going to do?
Which, wild, everyone. Wild for Patrick Stewart to now be Bosley.
It's good to see he's finally being given a chance in the spotlight, you know?
I know. He's just been waiting for that big break in comedy. That big break in comedy that just doesn't seem to come to everybody.
Too many people don't know of the wonders of Patrick Stewart. He's only been in, Jeffrey, I think, and not many other films.
Oh my gosh. I always forget that he was in Jeffrey. He has the best line.
I tried rewatching it lately. It's not a good movie.
Oh, it's such a shame. He's so catty in it. And he's a devotee of Martha Stewart. So he might be my favorite character inside of that.
I think you're confusing him for his boyfriend, who
Oh, no,
is
his
catty.
boyfriend is awesome too.
In as much as he's an actor in the Broadway show Cats now and forever. Except that it's no longer running.
It's true. Forever just wasn't as long as we all thought it would be.
Anyway, I apologize for the error. Let's find out what error I'm going to make this episode.
Woohoo!
This time we watch Season 1, Episode 8, The Slime People.
But first, a short Radar Men from the Moon, Chapter 6, Hills of Death. Last time on Radar Men from the Moon, Cody and a friend were racing along a mountain road trying to catch the Earthmen working for the Moonmen, but the car swerved and fell off the cliff with Cody still in it. How did he escape? Well, it turns out it was just the car that fell over the cliff and Cody had already rolled out. Whew! The Earthmen got away back to bad guy headquarters. And what's this? A call from the leader on the moon? He says, drop an atomic bomb in a dormant volcano and make it erupt, as this will cause torrential rain, massive floods, and thus disrupt the transportation system of Earth worldwide. The bad Earthmen rent a plane and drop the bomb. It works real well, but they inadvertently leave a clue behind that helps Commando Cody and his friend find them. It's a matchbook from Al's Cafe, and wouldn't you know it, they're regulars there. Commando Cody and his friend go to Al's Cafe and are surprised by these bad guys just coming in right after them. A fist fight ensues, and Cody might have won, but the bad guys pull a gun on Al. That's not fair, playing on his sense of morality. They kidnap Cody's friend and head off into the mountains. But Cody's friend has rolled out of a moving car before, and he'll do it again. Now that the good guys know what the bad guy's car looks like, the bad guys need to get a new one. So they drive to the mountaintop and wait for a car to be delivered. Cody hears where they are, puts on the rocket suit, and heads to the top of the mountain to capture them. A gunfight takes place, followed by a chase scene. Cody corners one of the bad guys near a cliff, but where's the second bad guy? Why, he's waiting in secret to throw a rock at Cody's head. He nails Cody, and Cody tumbles off the cliff. No, Cody! How will you escape certain death this time? Tune in next time to find out, but for now, that's the end.
And now for our feature presentation. There's a fog upon LA, and this fog has coalesced into an impenetrable dome that prevents people from getting in or out of the city. Good thing most of the people were evacuated in time, but not everyone. We follow a handful of people who are stuck inside the dome as they try to figure out what's going on and how to break through. Our heroes consist of a reporter, a marine, and a professor, as well as the professor's two daughters, who, of course, instantly fall in love with the reporter and the marine. They're also briefly joined by our writer, but he's too quirky to survive. You see, the fog was created by these humanoid creatures who have been living underground, the titular slime people, though, as I said, they are the driest-looking slime people you ever did see, more like bumpy lizard people. Anyway, they're the ones who made the fog dome, and our heroes learn all about what's been going on from a fully edited newsreel that tells the whole story that they discover in the reporter's TV station. Well, anyway, the slime people are fierce and they're hard to kill, because if you pierce them with a weapon, they'll quickly heal up. And there are a few fight sequences, and the slime people kill the writer, and they briefly capture one of the daughters. There's even a few interactions with other people left behind who are drunk or zombified or something. Whatever. Most of the movie involves the men endlessly yammering on about how they might destroy the dome while walking around in the fog. Fog so thick that you can barely see anything on screen. For a decent percentage of the movie, it is impossible to make out what's going on. So, let's just skip ahead. Turns out the solution is salt. Table salt, sodium chloride, which is in unexpectedly short supply, I guess, but nevertheless our heroes figure out how to destroy the slime people's fog machine, which causes the dome to pretty quickly disappear. The military can now enter LA and kill all the slime people, and LA can go back to normal. Yay. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, If you had to guess who is the chipper morning being on the Satellite of Love, who would you guess? Because it's Crow. It's Crow. Their wake-up routine is interrupted by the invention exchange. Joel has created cartoon eye goggles that let you extend your eyeballs like a cartoon character. Awooga! The Mads have taken us to the beloved fair for some genetically modified food items like cotton candy that screams when you eat it. Fun for the whole family. After this installment of Radar Men from the Moon, we find the bots in court in the trial of the century, the people versus Commando Cody, Judge Joel presiding. Crow argues Commando Cody can't be real as he is guilty of breaking all sorts of laws like gravity and decent storytelling. Tom argues in Cody's defense, summing up with a Santa Claus defense. Letters. Letters sent through the postal system to the very real Commando Cody. But you've all seen this miracle before, and you know it takes a mountain of letters to convince, and Cambot is happy to oblige. At our next viewing break, the bots ask Joel why this movie was even made, and how these slime people could even make sense. But even more, how could humans be so gullible to make such a nonsensical movie? Joel explains that when you have an idea for a movie, it doesn't have to be good. You just have to find someone who's willing to pay for it to be made. And that's how this movie and so many others exist. So the bots start pitching ideas that someone might pay for so they can make lots of money too. Maybe a show where some guy is stranded from a shipwreck and he builds friends from the wreckage and they watch bad shows together? Nah, that'll never catch on. One more movie break finds us on deck in a fog bank. Isn't it scary? Ooh, when you can't see what's going on, your imagination can make everything into the worst horror. But it's hard to be scared when the slime people are just misunderstood. The bots suggest that maybe if the bridge was even more opaque or dense, it would scare Joel more. Mostly, I just wonder how he would breathe immersed in deli-style lemon whip or a 7-layer salad. But then, it is just a show. I really should just relax. We finally see the end of the movie and return to the bridge to find, the smell of home cooking? Joel must be baking. Yes, he's talking like he's on a baking show and making a pie for the bots. He actually finished one earlier and left it on this windowsill right here. Wait a second. Where did that pie go? GPC, how could you eat all that pie on your own? Sheesh. We all need cheering up after that, as only a letter can do. Even the Mads are happy. Real happy. Thrilled to the bone, even. What do you think, sirs?
Allow me to begin today's discussion with a quote from the good book, The Amazing Colossal Episode Guide, in which Michael J. Nelson writes, "Though we ended up hating Commando Cody, it was fresh to us in those days, and the writing team began laughing to distraction when Cody's partner hid in the bushes and someone said, 'I'm a little fuzzy rabbit, come and find me, I'm so naughty.' Well, it was funny, and you have to remember it was a very small room with almost no ventilation. As for the slime people, funny as it was, I wish we could do it again with a full staff of writers. It is a perfect movie for us."
Okay, respectfully, I think I want to disagree with this being a perfect movie for them. And my evidence is the number of riffs that they are able to make. This seems like a really lightly riffed movie. There's so few riffs compared to usual, and almost none of the riffs are about who these people remind them of, right? Like there's very, very few times where they're like, oh, that guy reminds me of Pat Sajak, or oh, that person reminds me of so-and-so, right? Because you can't see anything. And there's only so many riffs you can make about a grayed out screen. And they make them all, don't get me wrong. But it's just not riffing at the same kind of volume as we're used to. It's super light. I don't think this is the perfect movie for them.
Well, as he says, it's season one. They don't have a full writing room, so they're not making as many jokes as they would when there are even more writers in the room.
Sure, but I think even compared to other season one episodes, it just feels like there's periods of time that go by where they're saying almost nothing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. There is a lot more pure fog in this film than there is, dust storm in Hercules versus the Moon Men or whatever,
Sure.
or even rock climbing in the rock climbing episode. But like,
this is not deep hurting. They didn't come up with a deep hurting thing to do alongside the fog.
no, they hadn't come up with that yet. But like, I don't know. There's goofy looking monsters that they're fun. There's absolutely weird people and locals. There's absolutely no logic to anything in the movie. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like they could have underlined that a bit more. I don't know. There are some compelling things about the Slime People as a movie, but it is very hard to watch because it's very hard to watch, as you say. There is so much of the runtime which is just that fog effect, which is so thick and so dense.
It totally is. I spent most of the time looking at my screen, squinting, like, is this just me? Do I need a new prescription? I just don't see what's going on here.
Oh, well, I will say, on the other hand, that I think this is my favorite riffing of a Radar Men from the Moon chapter.
It is the Radar Men from the Moon that seems to have the most going on.
Exactly. It's like stuff happens and they make jokes about it, and those jokes are pretty good. I don't know.
The little bunny rabbit really is a pretty funny riff. I got to agree.
I just wasn't bored out of my mind like I usually am with Radar Men from the Moon.
No.
We were talking a little while ago about Andy Rooney shorts, and did the one about morning people make it into the edit? I can't remember, but there was one where he talks about how morning people are just the worst.
Well, except that, no, he was talking about how morning people were just the best.
Oh, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
They were virtuous and excellent, and night people were naughty and, smoked cigarettes and stuff and drank beer and, oh, how dare they? And morning people, really, they're chipper and they get a jump on everything. Yeah, I would never have guessed that Crow was the morning person in that crew.
No, and yeah, no, that's why I misremembered it, because he was so blatantly wrong.
Right?
And I think this little sketch proves it, because Crow is insufferable
Yeah.
as a morning person. But I agree. Well, I mean, I don't know. Crow has a lot of energy at weird moments, especially in the early days.
Sure, but Tom is clearly the morning bot. Like, come on.
Tom does seem more like the morning bot. He does seem like the person who would wake up with a song in his throat.
Seriously, he's going to wake up with a song from, like, Oklahoma. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Come on, like, that is Tom, not Crow.
Yeah. Oh, well, what are you going to do?
I'm going to argue with the people who created MST3K. You got it wrong.
Hey, this is the second movie or short in a row where they've dropped a bomb into like a volcano.
Isn't it weird?
It's pretty weird.
What a weird plot point.
Yeah, why would you do that?
I don't know. I mean, and to think that, well, so we have last time inside of our 12 to the Moon, somebody dropped a bomb into the volcano in order to heat up North America. And this time, they drop a bomb into the volcano in order to interrupt the weather systems on Earth and make it worldwide torrential downpour. And so, like, very different outcomes that they're hoping from the bomb and the volcano thing. But it seems like such a weird choice. What are they thinking? Having seen footage of like the 1980 explosion of Mount St. Helens, where it looks like half of the mountain is kind of melting away and then it explodes out in that direction with a whole bunch of hot ash, I don't want to drop a bomb in a volcano. It seems like a really bad idea.
Well, so good news. We have dropped bombs into volcanoes before.
Well, hold up. Like, both of these movies have taught me that dropping bombs in volcanoes is actually not a good thing. You're telling me it is.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. All right.
I just said we've done it.
But the world didn't end. We didn't get the torrential rains that the radar men from the moon think we're going to get. And it also didn't superheat North America, because I don't remember a heat wave caused by bombs in a volcano.
No, well, these weren't atomic bombs that were dropped. These were regular bombs. This was back in the 30s, and a few bombs were dropped into Mauna Loa
Oh,
in
on Hawaii. Mhm.
Yeah, because it was spewing and it was threatening the town of Hilo, and a lot of people lived there, and so they wanted to try to protect them, and so they dropped some bombs into it to basically rechannel the lava so that it wouldn't spill out and go onto the town.
Okay, like they were trying to create new places where the lava would push through first before it went down that side of the island?
Basically, yeah, they were trying to give it easier channels that it would want to go through. Like, it's lava's a fluid, and fluid tends to want to go through the easiest way. So if you give it a path that's going to be easier, then it's more likely to do that. It is super not clear whether these bombs actually helped. The people in Hilo were fine, I guess, but it might have been that the volcano was calming down anyways and that the bombs didn't do anything. I believe it's inconclusive. I'll have a link to a National Geographic article about it. So, there's that. But maybe that got the idea of throwing bombs into volcanoes in people's minds, if that was widely known, which I don't know if it was.
Well, it's interesting to think about trying to control a volcano in a way that allows you to save a settlement near it, because that's a plot point that comes up in at least two different things that I can think of up the top of my head. One's like A Tale from Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, and the other is an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Wait, what? What is that? I don't remember that happening in either of those.
So there's A Tale from There's one of the books in the series of Earthsea is the Tales
it's a later
from
book.
Earthsea.
I've only read the first one.
It's a later book, but the thing that happens inside of the story is that the older wizard can feel that there's going to be a large earthquake, and there's going to be some flow of the mountain that's going to go down towards the big settlement where people live. And he remembers a spell he learned when he was a very young wizard about getting into the bones of the earth and calming it down, but needing a second wizard to keep the channel open for that flow to go around where people are living. And so they're using magic in tandem to save the people in the town from this earthquake and earth movement that's going to happen on the island where they live. So that's what I'm remembering from the Tales from Earthsea. And of course, the older wizard has to become a part of the bones of the earth, and he can't come back out again.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful story, and of course all the people of the town think that Ogion's the one who saved them because he's the only one they could see. And he's like, I could never have done this without my master. So I remember that part of Tales from Earthsea, right? It is trying to control the movement of the earth in order to save a settlement that lives nearby. And it happens in Avatar too, right? Like the waterbenders and airbenders, when lava flow is coming down towards a town, they use their bending skills to create a tunnel to redirect the flow of lava so it doesn't come at the people in town.
Right. Okay. Sure. Yes.
So not bombs, but it's that same sense of we need to redirect the lava so that the town settlement can remain safe and secure.
Right. But there might be other reasons why you would attempt to bomb a volcano. There was a article in Popular Science in 1944 suggesting if we bombed a volcano in Japan, maybe it would erupt. And then it would cause, bad things to happen to the Japanese, which, yikes.
As if bombs aren't bad enough by themselves?
Yeah. But nowadays, people generally seem to think that if you dropped a nuclear bomb into a volcano, it wouldn't do anything interesting.
Oh, huh.
It wouldn't cause an eruption in that same way that we seem to think in these movies or in our World War II unsolicited war advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, that's so interesting that the volcano has so much more energy and destructive power all on its own, that the bombs we would drop in would essentially be like a drop in a pond type of thing. It would be no big effect.
Well, and you can sort of tell this because earthquakes, like a big earthquake, is about as much energy and force as a big nuclear weapon, right?
I never thought of it that way. I mean, we've talked about it on pod before, but I lived through the 89 quake inside of the San Francisco area, and I just never thought of that as being equivalent force to a nuclear or atomic bomb. Huh.
So, according to the USGS, a magnitude 9 earthquake, like the one in Japan in 2011, releases the energy of nearly a 2,000 megaton nuclear weapon. And the strongest we've ever set off is a 50 megaton weapon.
Holy crud.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Now there may be other nuclear fallout issues, but
Sure. Radiation, blah, blah, blah.
But, the volcano doesn't care about that, I don't think.
No. Thank goodness. The thought that we might have thrown a bomb into Mount Fuji and just destroyed that whole landscape just to, I don't know what, be right? That would have been horrid. Gah.
Yep.
Yep.
And thankfully we did nothing horrid during World War II.
No. Yes. Completely absolved of all of our crimes. Chris, it was such a frustrating experience to watch this movie because so much of what you wanted to be able to see, you couldn't see because of the fog that was being created.
I never thought of myself as wanting to see these terrible movies in that way. But you're right, it probably wasn't helpful that I couldn't make out anything.
I think it was not helpful for the riffers too, right? They chose this movie, but I think that had they been able to see more through the fog, they could have done a lot more with this movie. But anyway, it made me curious about movies that have fog as a plot point, and if they are able to do it better visually. So I watched a couple of these.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think of movies with fog in the... I guess there's... The Fog.
Yes, exactly. This movie has Tom Weller in it, who is the kid who played Superman in one of the series that they had on in the 90s. But it's a movie called The Fog, in which a small town on an island in Oregon, of course, is obscured by fog. This really weird fog comes in, and people start dying, and computers start crashing, and radios stop working, and cars stop working. And it turns out that in the fog are vengeful spirits of people who wanted to settle on the island, but that the people who were living on the island and who had settled on there first decided they weren't going to let them. Instead, they were going to kill them all and steal their money. And then they make a new town. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And now these ghosts have finally come back for vengeance.
So are they more judicious about when they use fog?
Yes. And isn't that what you need? You get to see fog coming down the road towards you, creeping in a creepy way. It's not just all around you at all times until you're going to die.
Yeah, no, that makes sense if the fog actually looks intentional rather than you smeared mayo all over the film. Charlotte, I got to tell you, there's a lot of listeners right now who are screaming at the podcast because you watched the remake of a movie that they probably love the original of more.
Oh, yeah, I did not watch the original. Tell me about the original.
Well, I haven't seen it, but what you watched was a 2005 remake of a 1980 film called The Fog, directed by John Carpenter, starring Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Janet Leigh.
God, I wish I had found that one on my streaming network because I would have preferred it. I'm going to tell you right now, Tom Weller is not the best actor.
Also, that version of the film takes place in Northern California, which is even more known for its fog.
Well, I mean, I've lived in both. The coast of Oregon is known for fog as well, but
It's true. It's true.
not quite in the same way as California. I'll grant you.
Okay, so you saw The Fog.
So I saw The Fog. I saw the remake of The Fog, apparently. So listeners, I'm sorry. I'll go look at the John Carpenter one. I'd way rather watch that. He's an amazing director and has an amazing idea of like script and pacing. And I enjoy John Carpenter's work quite a bit. And probably would have enjoyed that movie more. I mean, it was fine. You know, Tom Weller's hunky.
Sure.
Sure.
So did the fog consume your entire vision, like in the Slime People?
Ugh.
Or were you able to see other films on the horizon with fog at them?
Thank goodness I saw another one. Because the Fog was not a great movie. But I did watch a movie called The Mist,
Okay.
starring Thomas Jane. I forget the name of the director, but you did point me to a interview with him where he was like, actually, I always thought of this as being a black and white movie. And in fact, he thinks about it in terms of, I did this in color. And when I do it in color, it looks like the kind of scary movies that come out of the 70s. And then if you do the same movie and then it's in black and white, it reminds me of the kinds of scary psychological thriller movies of the 60s. Probably a la the Slime People. I'm sure that's what he was thinking of.
Now, this is based on a Stephen King thing.
Yes, and the guy who directed it had done many Stephen King things before, like The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. So this is a very, very different story than that.
Oh.
This is more like a scary creatures from another dimension movie. It's almost like Stranger Things in that way.
Okay. And they come in mist?
Yeah, depending on how much you read about the movie. I think in the movie, nobody really knows what happened. There's some sort of a thunderstorm. You know, stuff happens to this guy's house and he's like, oh, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'll pick up a few things so we have some supplies. And once he's in the grocery store, this mist starts coming in, but you also see all these emergency vehicles going by. And then this guy just starts running towards the store screaming, there's something in the mist. It got John. And he runs in the store and says, shut the door, shut the door, shut the doors, right, to keep the mist out. And what you find out slowly through the course of the movie is that there are these monsters that are in the fog. And some of them are just like enormous bugs. Some of them are things that eat those bugs. Some of them are like many stories tall. And they're just menacingly out there. And you can't see them, but you can hear them. And there's all these people who are trapped in the grocery store. But as the camera is inside the store, you're not obscured from seeing what's going on in the store. You can see all of those people.
Right. It's just outside. It's the menace that everybody, like, don't go there where the fog is or the mist is. I'm sorry. The mist.
Exactly. So that works out really well. And there's like, this ominous presence, like everybody's at various stages of believing what's out there. And in the story, there's just a complete breakdown of how are people going to react when they're isolated and trapped with this menace all around them. And you can't even see the cars in the parking lot. The mist is so thick.
Yeah, it sounds like that's what the effective thing about this mist is
yes,
it allows your imagination to fill in all the details about if that's what we can see, what can't we see?
Yeah, it's true. Well, and the Slime People, I think, tries for that, right? When they're walking around in the mist and they can't see the Slime People until they're right next to them, like that's really scary because those Slime People are big and they want to hurt you, right?
Yeah.
S. Frost from our network from the sister show Hubris Ween would love this one because there's lots of giant spiders.
Charlotte, you say that as if The Mist wasn't featured in the 2019 Hubris Ween.
Oh, look at that. I'm telling you, they're so good over at that podcast.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13, count 'em, 13 fun facts about today's episode, The Slime People. Go, Charlotte, go.
Okay, listeners, settle down. Let's open our math textbooks to page 161. All right, the first question is, in 1962, the city of Los Angeles was covered in a dome made of solidified fog. How large is that dome?
Right. Okay. Let's think about a real-world analog first. In 1959, shortly before the making of the Slime People, inventor and futurologist Buckminster Fuller dreamed up a proposal to place a dome over Midtown Manhattan.
That's right. Class, you might remember Buckminster Fuller and his geodesic domes from our episodes on Invasion of the Neptune Men and the Deadly Mantis. Remember, he didn't invent the geodesic dome, but he came up with the name and popularized the idea.
Yeah, despite their obvious drawbacks. So, okay, the idea of putting a dome over Midtown Manhattan was to climate control the area. If you keep everything under the dome nice and temperate, you don't have to air condition any of the individual buildings, and you'd never have to plow snow off the streets again.
That was the idea, anyway. Does anyone know what happened to the geodesic dome that the U.S. built in 1975 at the South Pole to house a scientific research facility?
Yeah. It had all kinds of problems. The tops of domes are, comparatively flat, so it's very easy for snow to accumulate there. But it can also be very difficult to get up there and clean it off. And also the dome puts a lot of pressure on the foundation just around the circumference. And even more pressure once it's covered by snow.
Exactly, which is why the dome was eventually replaced by modular buildings. So what do we know about the planned dome over Manhattan?
The proposal was that it was supposed to be 3 kilometers across and 1.6 kilometers high. That's like about a mile high. That's huge.
It is huge. You can imagine how difficult it would be to maintain a dome like that, or to replace parts as they aged and started to fail. So, what do we think about the fog dome over Los Angeles?
It's a little hard to tell if it's covering the whole city or not. The movie suggests it is. Is it covering the neighboring towns like Pasadena? Well, okay, we know that it extends over the ocean. But the distance from downtown Los Angeles, where the KTTV studios were, to the ocean is about 14 miles?
Okay, and so how high is the dome?
At least 7 miles high, right? I guess the dome might be more egg-shaped than a geodesic dome, but if it's a hemisphere, then the surface of the area is half of 4 pi r squared, where r is 7 miles, so that's about 308 square miles of surface area. And if it's completely flat, that's like pi r squared, so that's gonna be about half. It's gonna be 154 square miles of surface. So it's somewhere between those two.
And it's thick enough to trap a man. So let's say it's a foot thick. I won't make you do this math in your head. That works out to somewhere in the ballpark of 50 trillion gallons of fog, or about 190 trillion liters of fog, just in the wall. Add more for the other areas obscured by the fog, all from one little fog machine.
Wow, isn't Slime People technology amazing? Anyway, that's time. So, when our heroes get into the TV station and they're trying to close the door on the Slime People who are coming after them, and everything looks industrial and weird, and it's not foggy, but it's still kind of dark and hard to see, we get this riff.
Oh, great. Now they're in Slaughterhouse-Five.
Now, Charlotte, did you know what Slaughterhouse-Five was all about?
So, I didn't when I watched the episode, but then you told me, hey, there's a Slaughterhouse-Five reference inside of this particular movie. And so I went and read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and I was like, oh, that's what it is.
This is the first time you've read Slaughterhouse-Five, right? Because we
This
just
is
had you read Cat's Cradle.
Yeah,
for another
just a few
episode.
episodes ago. Yeah. And so I hadn't been a huge Vonnegut head growing up. I had never read anything by him. A few episodes ago, we were talking about Ice Nine. So we read Cat's Cradle. And knowing that Slaughterhouse-Five reference happened inside of this, I was like, I'm going to pick up that book and I'm going to read Slaughterhouse-Five. Why not?
Well, because you don't want to be sad is the presumable reason.
I mean,
How did you find Slaughterhouse-Five?
I enjoyed the book quite a bit, actually. So, I did not find it sad.
Oh, okay.
I mean, not sad like like the end of The Mist where I had to
No, it's not a tearjerker in that
no,
sense. No,
but it's
no.
not funny like Cat's Cradle is, right? Like both, Cat's Cradle is about the end of the world, sure, and humanity like imploding on itself and everything, and you have that sense of like humanity imploding in Slaughterhouse-Five as well, but it doesn't have the humorous elements like Cat's Cradle. Like the tone is very different.
Well, I mean, Vonnegut still described it as being composed of little chunks of text. They're not full chapters this time. They're sort of sections within a chapter, but they're still quite short. And he still talked about each of them basically being a joke. That's how he structured his novels, including this one, because of the nature of what it is, which is a novel based on Vonnegut's time in World War II, and specifically being a prisoner of war when the city of Dresden was bombed by the US and Britain. It's his attempt at figuring out a way of telling a meaningful thing of that memory. And he picks the most unlikely method of telling that story imaginable.
Well, yes, that seems on brand for Vonnegut. So, yeah, I enjoyed the way that the book was structured because he's not dealing with it as a narrative story, like beginning, middle, end, like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But it's very much like doing very large jumps in time and jumps in place and jumps in where some guy is in the story of his life, because he has this outer conceit of this person adhering to a different notion of how time works because he's been captured by aliens at one point in time and he's lived on another planet in a zoo-like place. And then he was presumably returned to Earth at the exact moment that he was removed and given back to the life that he was supposed to complete in his living. It was very weird.
Yes, although Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time, as the book says, and the unsticking in time happens before he's abducted by the aliens. But then again, what is time anyways?
What is time? I think we all learned this in 2020.
The aliens from the planet Tralfalmador exist in 4 dimensions, including sort of a long time as a 4th dimension. So they sort of see all of time at once, and they understand everything that has happened and will happen as being facts. It's like if you could see every frame of a film at the same time. That's sort of how they understand the universe. And there's some philosophy that comes with that, such as things gonna happen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it goes, as they say.
Yeah, well, that's how they understand death. And so it goes. Every time somebody dies in the novel or anything dies, and so it goes. And so it goes.
And so they understand death as not like a terrible thing because, of course, they're still alive. Like anybody who died also has all the time that they were alive. So you just have to understand that. And then you just, you just think about the good times. You think about the beautiful and the good, and you focus on that. And that's how you get wisdom.
Oh, well, this should have been talked about in Phantom Planet. Yeah, I mean, certainly the aliens' philosophy is very much why would you think about the bad things that happen to you when you can see everything that's ever happened all at once? And you can choose what you look at. So just look at the good things. because you can see them simultaneously, right? You like look at a person and you can see all of the things that have happened to them ever. You can see their face when they were a kid as well as their face when they're old, all at the same time. It's very strange. It's a weird way to think about how you might see the world. Clearly, I don't live in the fourth dimension like they do.
I think there is some connection. I think people have made this connection before, and I don't want to push it too hard, but there's an interesting way that sense of existing in all moments of time at once, and especially jumping between them when things are getting stressful, as seems to happen to our hero, Billy Pilgrim, is a bit like PTSD, right?
Huh.
And so this tense moment that he's in right now will jump him into a tense moment that he experienced during the war and then jump back out.
It feels very dreamlike, you know, like as I was reading it, it did not, again, like it doesn't feel like your typical narrative where you have a series of events taking place where what's going to happen next is affected by what's happening right now. And like, that's just not the way this works, because by the time he's captured in World War II by the enemy, we already know that he's going to have lived with a porn star in a zoo on another planet, and he's going to have gotten married and have had kids, and he's going to have had to travel to give speeches, and like all of those aspects of his life you already know when you reach this climactic point of his life, this what we would have thought of as a defining moment previously. It's now kind of buried in all of this, what the past was and what the future is and what right now is. It's a really weird way to tell a story. It was very compelling.
One of the other things is that most of the characters, and especially our main character, Billy Pilgrim, are very passive compared to what you expect from most novels. Things tend to happen to Billy and to everybody else. They don't go about choosing their own destinies. But of course, that makes sense from the Tralfamadorian point of view, that you just live your life. And also there's a moment when he brings this up in the novel and talks about, well, of course this makes sense because this is all happening during war. And war isn't a context in which you get characters.
Oh, that's so fascinating, considering how many World War II movies we have now that are so character-driven.
Exactly. Even the whole history of war literature, going back to the Iliad, let's say, is all about these big characters using war as a testing ground, as a proving their mettle, as showing who they really are. Like, that's the mythos of what going through war is all about. And Vonnegut's like, no, absolutely opposite. Being in a war is like being put through the jaws of a machine, and you have no control over what happens. Everything is just, free will is gone once you're a soldier in a war.
Well, his book would suggest that you didn't have free will in the first place.
Well, the Tralfamadorians would suggest that.
Mm-hmm.
He was asked about this a little bit in a Playboy interview in 1973, a few years after the book came out, and he said, "You understand, of course, that everything I say is horse." And I think that's also important to keep in mind whenever you want to say, oh, Vonnegut agrees with the Tralfamadorians or anyone else in his novel, that even himself appearing in the novel, which he does in more ways than one,
Mm-hmm.
is not actually meant to be a literal author insert in the sense. There's still an author character and an author function going on there.
Which, makes sense. Makes sense.
So I didn't think I'd have time to read the book again. I read it many, many, many years ago, and it was never one of my favorite books. So I was like, maybe I'll do something different. And I watched the movie.
There's a movie of Slaughterhouse-Five? Does it have John Wayne in it? Like, there's a scene inside of the book where he's like, they'll never make a movie of this because you can't make a movie and have John Wayne inside of this, or, some equivalent actor.
Yeah, he promises somebody that he'll make sure to write it in such a way that you would never cast John Wayne in it.
Yes.
And indeed, almost all the actors in this 1972 movie are unknowns. There was one weird exception, actually two. Billy Pilgrim's daughter, Barbara, is played by Holly Near, the feminist musician.
Really?
Yes.
Really? What?
She had a small career as an actor before becoming more known for her music.
Huh.
Super cool. Also, one of the English generals is played by John Wood, who I recognize because he has a really great role in one of my favorite films of all time, Orlando. He plays the guy who is insisting that Orlando must be his because he wants her.
Oh, sure. Isn't that the way women work?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I had actually listened to the score of this before because the score is by Glenn Gould, and I guess it got re-released recently because it popped up in like a new releases to recommend for you by Apple Music, and I was like, sure, I'll listen to this, and that was perfectly nice.
Interesting. It's like you're living in the Trafalgadorian.
Tralfamador.
It is like you are living inside of their time space where
Yes.
your past and your present and your future are all colliding in this moment, and you're seeing all things at once. The book that you read as a child, the movie you saw as an adult, the music you listened to then that you're listening to now.
So I enjoyed the movie a fair amount. I then decided that maybe I did have enough time since Kurt Vonnegut novels are pretty short. So I did quickly read the book again today, and I enjoyed it much more than I did when I first read it, possibly because I'm older and my taste for war stories might have changed. I mean, these kinds of war stories, I suppose.
Do you think seeing the movie helped you enjoy the novel as you went back to revisit it?
It might have. It gave me more things to think about, I suppose.
You also have a different understanding of time now. Like, I think that's a really big thing. You already said, like, maybe it's because you're older, but I think being older, you have this experience of thinking about your past and your present at the same time already.
Yeah. I mean, many, many characters in this book have a moment of expressing the thought, how did I get this old?
Yes.
And I certainly sympathized with them a lot more than I did when I was 20.
Ditto.
But
I don't know how this book would have hit for me if I had read it as a high school student or as a college student. I don't know how you process art that is about growing old, that is about time, when you have so little experience with it. I mean, I'm sure I would have done something with it. Come on. But
I think the thing that I got the most out of it back then was the really interesting claims about time and free will that the Tralfamadorians make. The idea that our sense of free will is caused by a disability that we can't see all of time at once.
yeah.
Right? That other creatures theoretically could, and we can't. Therefore, we've managed to convince ourselves that free will is a thing. I was like, huh, that's an idea. That's a good idea for 20-year-old me.
I especially liked the discussion of like, okay, you think it only takes like a man and a woman having sex to have a kid, but actually there's 7 other things happening in other dimensions that have to happen correctly in order for that like sperm to enter the egg and create a new life. There's so much more to it than what you can see.
You need at least 2 male homosexuals.
At least.
A small note is that this is apparently one of the first literary acknowledgments that gay people were sent to the camps.
Really?
Which he mentions in a list of all the people that are being rounded up by the Germans. And he includes that, and it's like, oh, interesting.
That wasn't known or talked about before?
I mean, I don't fully know whether that was just part of the general we must never talk about homosexuality of the era or what, but yeah, I guess so.
That's fascinating.
In addition to the movie, there's another adaptation which I just found out about, which I'm super curious by. There's a graphic novel that was put out a few years ago.
Whoa.
Which looks pretty interesting. And the adaptation was written by Ryan North, who is behind a fabulous early web comic that is still going on called Dinosaur Comics.
Oh, stop it. Really?
Of which you have a giant stuffed dinosaur that he helped design
right
in your
next
house
to me where I am right now.
So that guy
Wow.
did the novel, and a Spanish comics artist named Albert Montes did the artwork, and it looks pretty interesting, and I'm super curious to give it a read at some point.
Ooh. Well, Chris, we've bombed volcanoes. We've obscured vision with fog and mist. We've barely talked about the slime people. They're adorable. all, by the way. But maybe we have a final factoid to share with our audience.
Absolutely. There's a riff in the short that I'd like to point us towards. The context doesn't really matter, but we hear this.
Oh, I'm stuffed. That's the best progressive dinner I've ever had. Martha's Jell-O mold was out of this world.
Now, do you know what a progressive dinner is?
I do, I think.
Ooh, good, because this was something that I wasn't familiar with, and I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay. Can you tell me what you think a progressive dinner is?
So, progressive dinner. So they did progressive dinners when I was in college through some of the theme houses that they had that people could live in, where you would go to each of the houses in a particular order and you would be having like a single part of a meal there. And then everybody who was there would go with you to the next house and have that piece of dinner. And then you'd go with everybody to the next house. And so, I don't know, it's kind of like you could do this on a block where you get to go to all of your neighbors' houses and have a little piece of a meal and go through everything.
That is exactly correct. That is what a progressive dinner is. And I've never been on one, but it sounds like you have.
Yeah, it was something that my college did as a introduction to these their campus housing, but they were just a house that you could live in if you wanted to. Like you could apply to live in it instead of being in one of the dorm rooms. And they were themed houses. So like they had La Maison Française where you lived there, and every time you were inside of the house, you were always speaking French. And there was a native speaker from a French-speaking country who was a student at the school who would be like the head of the house. And they were a student at the school, but they were also like the resident assistant for there, and they would organize dinners and stuff. There was also the Spanish-speaking house, and there was also they called it the outhouse. It was the one that did all of our recycling on campus, and that was your job. If you chose to live in the outhouse, you were concerned with environmental issues. They had a whole bunch of volunteer stuff that they did inside of the Blue Mountains, and they did the recycling on campus for the college I went to. So and there was a Japanese house, and there was just different houses. And so you would go to all of these places, and it was your introduction to what the house was like. So you could decide whether or not you'd like to live there.
Right. Okay. I don't think it's going to be a huge surprise if I tell you that this tradition seems to have originated in the Midwest.
What? Midwest. I mean, it's very community-minded, so that totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's community-minded, and it's also an opportunity to passive-aggressively prove who's got the nicer house and who can make the nicest hot dish. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you want help with your math homework, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you and like our randomly selected supporter, Tim. Thank you, Tim. And for as little as $1 an episode, you too can be like Tim, and you can help us research and record this show, and you can join us on a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/161.
Hey, Chris, do you think our next movie is going to have a bomb dropped in a volcano too? 3 in a row! 3-fer!
It is entirely possible. Because I haven't seen our next episode yet, despite it being one that I've wanted to watch for quite a while. It is KTMA, episode 13, SST Death Flight.
Well, I know I haven't seen this, and if you haven't seen it either, it's going to be a complete surprise to both of us.
It's a 70s disaster film starring Lorne Green.
He's CanCon and he's Bonanza.
And Peter Graves and Burgess Meredith and Robert Reed and all sorts of people. Barbara Anderson, all sorts of great people.
It's the greatest hits of the 70s and your favorite disaster.
Well, that's how we celebrate Donald Pleasance Day now. So until then...
Steve, have you ever really looked at a squirrel? I mean, really looked at a squirrel. Up close.
It's not much, but I call it hell. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Oh, woo!